Nintendo has a history of having a lot of gimmicks for their consoles, typically one main one at the launch of a console. That's kind of what I'm going to be addressing here. Not necessarily the ones that come later, be it peripherals or other elements that become a staple. I'm going to try and stick to the elements that are with the system at launch as a marketing selling point and something that people remember and know. I'm also going to try to stay away from the ones that people might think, be it power or a new leap to a new generation being the gimmick. I want to try to avoid that. I would like to stick to hardware gimmicks as much as possible, although there will probably be some outliers and caveats, as not all of these have a core kind of gimmick that they sell the system on. Also, a few of these could maybe be argued. Let me know if there are ones you think I got wrong for the gimmick, or another element of the gimmick that you think should be more important. Just let me know. Okay, so getting started, we have the Famicom, or the NES. For this, I'm going to use the Famicom because it actually does have a built-in gimmick. Being their first system, it's kind of interesting that it does have one, but it does. Mic in the second controller that is used in a couple games. I think for Zelda, you can use it to kill certain enemies on screen if you yell into it or blow into it or whatever. There's a lot more like kind of hidden uses for it, nothing too major, but the fact that it's there is to me very reminiscent of, hey, let's have a fun little hardware thing in here that we can use to change a game or change an experience. They didn't really use it well. I mentioned the Zelda example. I don't really know many others. I think they mapped it to the select button for a lot of games. So with that, you could kind of just blow into the thing, and whatever select would do, it would do that, which, it's not really doing much. So I'm gonna put it in okay, mainly because it's really cool that it was there at that time, and it is memorable. So I'll put it there. Next, we have the Super Nintendo. So I know I wanted to stay away from just like power or graphical upgrades and stuff, but truly, I can't find something for the Super Nintendo that it was sold on besides the power. It's in the name, Super Nintendo, Super Famicom. It is, that is its thing, it was powerful. For a while, I thought the eject button might have been the hardware gimmick, which I guess still technically could be. It's kind of fun to eject the cartridges. So you could potentially spin that, but if we're just going with power, then definitely that is a superb gimmick to sell a console on. It's really strong. That could be a downside, I guess early on the PS3 kind of tried that as well, sort of, but it kind of flopped as a launch thing. But I think for a gimmick, just promising more power, more better graphics, RAM and runs better is not a bad method. You could also argue that potentially the extra buttons are a gimmick, or the shoulder buttons are a gimmick. And if that's the case, I think it still belongs in Superb, because adding shoulder buttons is the best. So next we have the Game Boy. The Game Boy's gimmick, I would say, was portability. When this came out, it really was sort of the only true portable console. I know there was the Game & Watches and potentially some other little devices, but this was a full-on, home console, potential arcade console experience on the go with, in your pocket. I think that alone is, that's an incredible gimmick. Being able to have that experience on the go, I think, still resonates to this day with a lot of consoles and new emulator consoles as well. That's like the whole thing. So I think it's a superb one easily. So next would be Game Boy Color. Now, Game Boy Color, it's in the name. Their thing was color. So that's kind of a hard one to, say, hey, our gimmick is adding color. Of course, color is a big important one, but I think to break it down a little bit more, because it's not just like we're putting all the color, you're putting a bit of color into pre-existing games and some newer games. So it's not, I wouldn't put it as important as, it's color in a game, because other systems had color, but it does fall into the lines of the sort of Nintendo gimmicks, we like to say, where it's a big marketing push, and it's an aspect of the system that gets utilized, sometimes far beyond launch, which, typical. But this is a great one. I just put it in great job because if it made it more colorful, I think it would be good, but it really does just kind of hinge the Game Boy's already existing kind of palette into different directions. It's not like, say, the Game Boy Advance, where it's like, whoa, full color. So I put great job. So next we have the Virtual Boy. There's really not much more to say here. The gimmick, I know we have 3D on the 3DS, but for this one, this is like aggressively painful 3D. It's vectors with only 2 colors. I know like the Game Boy basically made it work with only like 4 colors, more like 4 shades, but this is a very like, what were you thinking kind of situation. It was too occupied with if they could, they didn't think if they should. Okay, next we have the true next-gen Nintendo console, which is the N64. Now, I think truly, if you were to break it down, the sort of gimmick that the N64 was kind of going for was 3D. However, I would argue it was the 4-player local controller ports, which was more the gimmick in my eyes. When I think Nintendo 64, I'm thinking 4 players or 2 players. I'm thinking party games, I'm thinking Mario Kart, I'm thinking Mario Party, I'm thinking Smash Bros. All of that is 4-player local. And the other systems at the time had 4-player local, but you had to buy add-ons for it. N64 right out the box, that was kind of the thing, the element. It was the party system. I put it in great job. I would probably put it ahead of the color, but I didn't really put these in any particular order necessarily. So it's in great job. I would put it in superb, except for in the modern era, it's not really as useful as the other things that are there, or the other gimmicks just kind of have an edge because of that reason. Like, I know everyone wants more local games, but I think I only play local games with friends like once a year, twice a year maybe. Everything is online truly. Next is the Game Boy Advanced. So the Game Boy Advance falls into a similar position that the Super Nintendo does, where it's kind of, hey, what's the gimmick here? The gimmick is power, right? Game Boy Advanced. Although it does have one element that I would say was the first big time that the Nintendo system used this, and it would be backwards compatibility. I'm going to say Game Boy Advance's gimmick was backwards compatibility. And I know the Game Boy Color is technically, it is backwards compatible, but the games aren't really too drastically different from Game Boy to Game Boy Color, not like they are for the Game Boy Advanced to the previous gen. I think with Game Boy Advance, you really felt like, oh, I can play my old games. Where the Game Boy Color is like, of course I can play my old games, why could I not? But with the Game Boy Advance, it was more of a, this is great, that's awesome, especially for parents that are like, this is great, they can play their old games on this. So for backwards compatibility, put it in superb, obviously. Now, something about backwards compatibility that not a lot of people, sadly, not a lot of people want to admit, but no one really plays backwards compatibility beyond like the initial launch of a new console. You maybe will play like 3 backwards compatible games in your lifetime, but it's still amazing and it's a fantastic selling point. Then we'll do the SP next. Around this time, 2000, I think it was 2004, they were really, I think, reaching more into the hardware gimmicks now, where instead of just like improving on power and stuff, because Sony kind of again and again would beat them at that, they went with more just like interesting designs and had fun with their stuff. So this is the clamshell is the gimmick for the SP, and I would say this is really good, and I would say underrated as well. It makes the thing more portable. It protects the screen and the buttons, which is highly underrated. So it sort of acts as almost like a pseudo little case. And a bonus, if more modern clam shapes, like with the DS, the 3DS and stuff, it'll sleep the game. That's super great. Really a nice gimmick, I would say. Although it never really adds much to the games themselves. And I would also say it kind of, I think a drawback, maybe why I don't put it in a great job, is it typically makes something less comfortable. Next, we have the DS, which added dual screen, but also touch screen. So it's like a bit in a weird spot, but because it's kind of 2 gimmicks in one, but you can't really not say one. So, dual screen, touch screen. This was a really good one, although I have a couple caveats with it that would probably keep it from being great. And that is, a lot of the games, when I think about them, they could be single screen experiences. Like Pokemon, probably the best games on the DS could be single screen experiences. Things like New Super Mario Bros. Don't need the second screen, and sometimes it's just like a map or a menu. Even games that kind of require it, I think, could be altered to not have it, like the Zelda games, Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. You could get away with removing that element of it, and it would probably be good, maybe even better, hot take. But just when I think about that element, it keeps it from a higher level, I think, because maybe like most of these gimmicks, the games don't really necessarily get improved by the gimmick. We got GameCube now. People will say, well, the GameCube's gimmick is more power again, or perhaps it is the Game Boy Advance adapter, but truly, sadly, it's the handle. The handle is the hardware gimmick, and that's what they were kind of advertising it on when they initially showed it. So I'm sorry, everyone, the handle's the gimmick, and the handle sucks so bad. I won't put it in Nintendo, because Nintendo is like, this is aggressively bad, but the handles, man, it's kind of a nothing. And in fact, it probably makes the console harder to like stack and stuff, so it's not good. I think what's also funny, people talked about this as well, but like the idea of you running around with your GameCube out and about with the handle, but you still have to like put all your cords and stuff in like a backpack or a bag. So it just doesn't work. I don't know. It's so weird. It's bizarre. A lot of people like to say the Wavebird, the wireless controller, is the gimmick, but that kind of came a little bit later. If it was wireless controller, sure, we put that in superb, but it really wasn't. The handle was their initial thing. Okay, now we'll go back to the DS line and do the DSi. I'm putting it in okay because where a camera is pretty good, it was not used at all past its like initial kind of, you get it for Christmas or a birthday or something, and you use it a little bit because you don't have games or you just want to try it out, and then you just kind of put it away. I can't remember, but I believe at this time cell phones and smartphones had their cameras already, so it maybe was just a bit too late. If it came out earlier and had good camera a little bit earlier, I think that could have worked better. But where it kind of came out and what it was, it was just, it's okay. So then now we got the Wii. For the Wii, I think a lot of people, for some reason, act like allergic to motion controls, like they're the worst thing ever. And I'm not even talking about like, oh, but gyro controls are good. No, like the motion controls are perfectly fine. It's good and it's not a problem. Like I don't know why a lot of people point to it being like an issue when you can just kind of waggle and stuff. I understand mandatory stuff where it doesn't need to be there kind of sucks, but like the Wii sports games are really good. A lot of people like aiming and shooting in some of the shooty games retroactively. I really hated it at the time, but people like it, like a good light gun kind of style game. It's perfectly fine, and you got games like No More Heroes where you just kind of have to do like a finishing move with it. But yeah, I've never understood like the kind of the new pylon where it's like, oh, motion controls were awful and I hated them, and it's like, well, they were never that bad. They're always like, all right, I guess I just got to do it like this. It's fine. If you had to actually like full swing or get up or something like the Kinect, I can understand that because you have to like get up and stuff. But for the Wii, you can just sit on your couch and waggle the remote or move the remote. It didn't need to be a big thing. Yeah, I would put it in good, honestly. Okay, next we'll go to the 3DS. Maybe hot take, I put it in meh because the gimmick is obviously the 3D. It's not the analog stick and it's not the power, it's the 3D. And truly, everyone I talked to, anyone I knew who had it, you would try the 3D for like 10 minutes tops and then you turn it off. I'm so glad you could turn it off. Holy crap. The console would have sunk if you couldn't. But then also the fact that you had to hold the screen, like position a certain way, was really bad for that initial run. When they got the new 3DS and they kind of cleaned that up, that was better. But again, I was like, sweet, it works better. Turn off. There was like a couple games that, utilized it pretty well, like Mario 3D World. And I guess Ocarina of Time was kind of neat to see it in 3D, but that's all it was. It was kind of neat, but honestly, like everyone I knew turned it off. Like it did not need to be there at all one bit. The games on the 3DS are great though. I guess just to finish off the 3DS stuff. So we got the 3DS XL. We're putting it in great job because the gimmick is bigger, and that's a fine gimmick. That's a good gimmick. Yeah, I don't know, bigger. If they also had small in this deal, they don't. Like Game Boy Micro stuff, I'd probably also put in great job because I personally really liked when they have a smaller version. Not everyone does, but the bigger gimmick is enough to sell a console on its own. Like they don't even need to increase power necessarily. So yeah, throw it there. And then we have the new 3DS right there. I think people also might be like, oh, it's a power upgrade or they added the little dongle. No, the new 3DS, that one there is it had the faceplate swaps. That was its gimmick. Was you could buy these faceplates and swap them. I kind of wish it came to America more. I would have got it over the XL if I'm being honest, because I like the smaller ones. And the faceplate seemed cool, but it's just okay. It changes the themes on your system, I'm pretty sure as well, which is pretty cool in my opinion. But I probably would have just gotten like one or two plates that I liked and just kept that forever anyway. So it wasn't much, but it was neat. It was all right. All right, now we have the Wii U. I think people also hate this like in a weird way. They're like, oh, it's awful. It's really not. And in fact, the Wii U gamepad is like wholly unintrusive most of the time, where it's there and it's fine, and it's pretty comfortable too. Like it's bizarre that people feel almost like a hate towards it when I find it doesn't really deserve it. It's just kind of there. It really dropped the ball. A lot of lost potential. I think they tried a couple games to use the dual screen stuff and it didn't work super well. A lot of them just defaulted on maps or menus, much like the DS. And that's fine. The biggest mess up, obviously, most everyone says this, is the range was terrible. So, you could play it in like the next room only, and if you went a little bit farther, it would just disconnect. So that sucks. And then not every game had the ability to just play the game on the one screen. But then you kind of have this dilemma where it's like, do you just want the functionality to be you can play it on either the gamepad or the TV? Or do you want the gamepad to have unique functionality like, say, Star Fox Zero? And then you get everyone mad because you don't really want that second screen functionality. So, yeah, it's a bummer. I think the bottom line is, though, should have had extended range for especially the games where you could kind of just play on the screen, for sure. And you should have been able to buy more. That maybe would have been harder to program, but essentially, if you could buy more gamepads, it would just be like people playing with a bunch of DSs around, and that's fine. Like, you know, if you played like Smash Bros for Wii U, and some of your buddies had 3DSs, that's what some of my friends used. It was like perfectly fine. You know, you get your own little second screen that has your stats or whatever on it, and it's, yeah, that was I think a huge bummer is you couldn't have multiple gamepads, and they didn't utilize that aspect. And then last, you know, we got the Switch. It's just perfect. What gimmick is it doing? What gimmick is it not doing, really, is the better question. But the gimmick being the hybrid console, portable, and also a home console. Perfect. And the element that I like the most, actually, that I don't think people love about it enough, is the fact that you have your two little controllers you can take off, and they can be two controllers, and you can play with it anywhere. I've actually played a lot where I bring it over, and there's no TV, you don't have a dock, whatever, you're waiting, and you can just play two-player on a game. It's really wonderful. And I don't think people praise that aspect of it enough. The Switch is everything Nintendo was and is, and thrown into one thing. It's portable, it's home console, it's motion controls, it's multiplayer. It's superb. I kind of hope that the Switch 2 is not just a power upgrade, if I'm being honest. I actually hope they try something. But, you know, if it's just a power upgrade, that's fine. If anyone disagrees, let me know. I think I took some liberties with some of these and maybe pushed these in directions that maybe you don't think they should have been pushed. So yeah, let me know your opinions, and if I got this wrong, and if I left out any, I kind of left out the 2DS because, well, it wasn't on the tier list. So if you'd like to get access to my models and stuff, you can go follow me on Ko-fi. I like to release models for free every month for about a week, and then they go behind my subscription thingy on there. So yeah, I don't know if you want to support me and that stuff, you can go ahead and do that. They're not great, but they're interesting, I think.
Ep.13